Welcome back to the We Get to Do This podcast. I'm Kailee.
And I'm Jacob. This is the show for anyone chasing something hard, where we turn I have to into we get to.
With real, relatable, and resourceful conversations on business, training, recovery, wellness, and mindset. Let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of We Get to Do This. Today, we were joined by Bethany Brausen, a physical therapist and run coach specializing in runners and pelvic health.
Bethany ran Division I at the University of South Dakota and dealt with her own cycle of bone stress injuries from underfueling, which is exactly why she started Tempo Physical Therapy and Running Performance.
We're getting into how bone stress injuries develop, why shin splints can be an early warning sign, and how underfueling sets off a chain reaction through your hormones and bone density.
And we also talk about the female athlete triad, why losing your period is never something to push through, and why strength training might matter more for your bones than running itself.
So let's get into it with Bethany Brausen.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the We Get to Do This podcast. Bethany, thanks for being here. It's good to have you on. I'm excited. We're excited to chat with you again. And also shout out to the Lupit Loppet for introducing us to you. You were tabling there when we first met. So we always start our podcasts by asking our guests, who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it? So I'm going to turn it to you and let you take it from here on those three questions.
Yeah, well, thank you both for having me. I'm super excited to kind of talk about a lot of different things within the running world with you guys. And so my name is Bethany. I am a physical therapist and run coach. I grew up, I would say like the pipeline from soccer to running a little bit. So I grew up most of my youth running long distance. I ran Division I at the University of South Dakota. And then I still like to run a little bit competitively, but more socially, post-collegiately. And with physical therapy, I specialize in orthopedics and more kind of specifically with runners and pelvic health. So I kind of like to bridge the gap between a few different injuries that I've seen kind of pop up over the years, just with people in their running related goals, but maybe pelvic health related goals, and even further into that, what can happen with some running related injuries when they're repetitive or like over and over, and you kind of start to see these patterns form, which I know we'll start to talk a little bit about today. But part of what got me into physical therapy and run coaching is my own injuries. So growing up, I had a history of low energy availability, and we'll talk about this more today, or REDS, relative energy deficiency, which led to kind of a cycle of bone stress injuries, or BSIs. And so I was like, man, why is this happening? Like, I'd have one, I'd be good for a year, and then another one would pop up. And even like post-collegiately have had these injuries pop up, and it's like, why is this happening? Like, how can I learn more about my body and try and help reduce the risk of this happening in younger athletes? Which then kind of spurred my motivation to start Tempo Physical Therapy and Running Performance, which is the business that I now have and have been in for a year on my own. And it's really to provide that high level of individualized care for athletes that are experiencing these recurrent injuries, like they've gone the traditional route, it's not working, and they really do need a change in maybe their training approach and how they're fueling, which I refer to. That stuff is out of my scope from a nutrition standpoint, but just like being able to identify that and figure out what in their training and their rehab has to change for them to get out of that cycle. With coaching, I'm an assistant coach for Minnetonka Girls High School Cross Country, so our season is coming up soon. The girls are getting geared up with captain's practices, so I'm looking forward to that in the fall. But yeah, my main why and my reason for getting into this was to really help a younger generation throughout their lifespan. So I do see younger athletes, I would say like middle age, and then older adults as they're navigating just history of injury and trying to get out of that injury cycle.
I love it. I am very curious, kind of sorry to put you on the spot. If you know the answer to this, that's totally fine. Do you have any idea what percentage or like how many runners just in general deal with either like REDS or some type of stress injury? Do you know if there's any do we have any data? Do you know, anyone know if there's any data on that?
It's a lot, and it's kind of constantly changing. I think it's underreported for sure, because we hear about it a lot, maybe in runners specifically, and more endurance related impact sports, but it's happening like in all sports. So the chance of it happening, and we do have like data on this, like the chance of it happening in a field sport like soccer, lacrosse, maybe like hockey, basketball, court sports, is less. It's still happening, but it's definitely less. And part of that, I think, is like the culture of the sport. It's also what types of movements they're doing in their sports that makes their bodies just more resilient. But we do know that athletes who are under fueling are 2 to 4 times more likely to have a bone stress injury because of relative energy deficiency. So, and usually after someone's had a bone stress injury, they're already at a higher risk of having a subsequent one. So it's like the biggest risk factor for having another one is already having one. But under fueling is kind of the culprit of what brings all of this on.
Right. And I bet, just imagine how many runners too that have like a bone bruise or a stress reaction that never get that reported anywhere.
Right.
So that's got to also be high, I imagine.
Yeah.
I bet
and
there's
I
a
think
lot of people running through those.
Right. Well, yeah. And like the biggest one you hear is like shin splints. So like shin splints is kind of this umbrella term of there's irritation at the shin, and it's essentially like these muscle fibers are pulling at the bone, which is kind of what breaks down a bone over time, but also what builds up a bone. So like if we have strong muscles and we're fueling properly, like that muscle contraction on the bone is what's going to build it up, with like specific loading and dosage. But if we're under fueling and we're adding impact and we're kind of like constantly going into debt, like our body's reserve, it's like we're constantly just like pulling out but not putting enough food and nutrition in to our body, that over time is what breaks down bones. And so someone who, is fueling properly, maybe they just ramped up training a little too quickly and they're having these shin splints, that might calm down with a little bit of rest and like modification to their training. But someone who's not fueling properly and continues to load and doesn't back off, that's where we see that progress into the bony edema and then potentially a stress fracture. And at that point, it's like, okay, where we could have stopped it and maybe just like let it calm down, cool down a little bit. Now we're going to have more conservative management and time offloading. So and the other interesting thing about that is like stress reactions, there's degrees of severity. So depending on the location of the stress reaction, that'll determine how long of a recovery you need and what type of rehab you'll need because of that.
What are the different ones?
So with bony injuries, you can essentially get them in different types of bones in your body. So there are like your long bones or like cortical, like they're usually made up of cortical bones. So like your shin is a good example of a shaft. So it's kind of like the sturdy shaft cortical bone. And then like the epiphysis of the bone, like the ends of the bone, that is made up of trabecular bone. So trabecular bone is more of a nutrient-rich area. And if you're starting to see bone stress injuries in those areas, there's a high chance that it's related to a fueling issue. If it's in the shaft of the bone or like the cortical bone, like the tibia, then there's possibly still a fueling issue, but it's a lower risk site. And that just has to do with, does a bone stress injury at a higher, like a bone stress injury in a higher risk site, there's a chance that you might need surgical fixation if you were to let it go too long. And so in those areas where blood flow could be compromised, healing could be delayed, and there's a chance of a non-union, that's the high risk site. So that could be like your femoral neck, your navicular bone in your foot, the anterior cortex of your tibia, which is like the front of the shin, whereas like the inside of the shin is a lower risk site. And that has more to do with when you run, where the tension's happening. So anytime your foot hits the ground, you're tensioning the front side of the bone and it's starting to bend, whereas there's compression on the back side of the bone. So the force on the back side, the chance of that healing is better than constantly being pulled apart on the front side of the bone. So if you catch them really, really, really early, the high risk sites can still heal conservatively. They're just considered higher risk because if they were to progress, the chance of surgery is higher and blood flow kind of compromised.
What would be
So,
the first signs for somebody to
yeah,
look for
have
so that
one.
we can catch it like right away?
Yeah. And I think I'll start with like earlier signs of maybe underfueling. So if we were to kind of like separate these two types of fractures again. So if we're considering fueling as an issue, so low energy availability is essentially we're not giving ourselves enough fuel for the demands of our daily life. And I think what like the bigger problem that ends up happening is a lot of athletes like think they're eating enough, but they're really just not. And so it's a lot of times not intentional. There is intentional underfueling, and that kind of exists on a spectrum too of eating disorders. But when we're not giving ourselves enough fuel and we're constantly pulling away from our energy stores, our body has to compensate in different ways. And so that's underfueling or low energy availability is kind of what leads into REDS. So relative energy deficiency in sport, which is this kind of physiological and performance hindrance because of the effects of low energy availability. So that's where like the injuries exist is kind of when we're underfueling enough that it's affecting all of our other body systems. And bones is kind of like one area, but then there's mental health, there's digestive issues, there's like in pelvic health, there's incontinence, there's emotional kind of disturbance. So there's so many things that can be affected. And I have there's a great article I can like send to anyone who's interested that kind of highlights all these different physiological but also performance factors that are affected. So then on the performance side, it could be like reduced aerobic capacity, reduced max strength, reduced reactive strength. And there's all these signs that you should be hearing first from an athlete, hopefully before they even get to that point of like, ooh, I feel like maybe I have a bone stress injury coming on. So some things could be like my irritability is increased. My hair feels more brittle. I'm losing my sex drive. Like my appetite's going down. Like there's all these other things that you'll start to hear athletes saying early on that, if left untreated, can kind of cascade into these more severe symptoms of REDS. So by the time an athlete has like, let's I guess consider like a female athlete, by the time a female athlete has lost her period, like we are like already into kind of a hole where there were probably other things maybe going on before that even happened. And so same thing with bone stress injury, like this is kind of, there's like lines of defense in our body that are happening before we even kind of get to a bone breaking down. But it's hard to tell too if we're not tracking it. So there's better ways to track. I know like HRV, like heart rate variability is kind of like a topic a lot of people are talking about because it's popping up in wearables. And it actually is a good way to measure kind of how people are doing. But it's only measuring like one point in time sometimes. So like if you can get data over several weeks and months, you can start to see maybe where an athlete's not recovering well. So like if they're plateauing, that HRV is flattening, they're coming to you with some of these signs and symptoms. It's like, okay, like what's going on? Like, are we fueling properly? And like fueling as in, are we getting enough? Not necessarily like quote unquote healthy fueling, which is kind of my biggest gripe because most runners are like, what should I eat? And I'm like, you should just be eating. Like we should just be getting like 4,000 plus calories. And obviously everyone's different, but like go to your dietitian if you have questions. And a sports dietitian who's specialized in RED. So when bone stress injuries start happening, the symptoms are kind of vague. They, from my experience, they're weird. Like sometimes they can just feel like tension that doesn't calm down. So like I've had them in my femoral neck. I've had them in my tibia. When I was in college, I had one in my sacrum, and it's almost like this like in the beginning, it's more of like a dull, almost like vibraty kind of ache feeling. And sometimes, like in the femur specifically, there's this unloading type of pain where it's like the impact didn't necessarily bother me right away, but it was like when I took pressure off my leg, I would feel it. When it progresses, it can become sharp, and some people will start to like limp when they're running, and really like it kind of physically stops you at a certain point. But early on, it's like kind of vague. You can't really pinpoint it unless it's like in the tibia where you can touch it. Like sometimes it's like, oh yeah, that's sharp right there. Versus like a posterior tibial tendon irritation could be the length of your muscle. Like usually there's like a focal spot in your tibia. So yeah, it can really vary. The higher up and like deeper it is kind of the hard spots. So anytime, like for example, a runner is like, oh, my hip flexor, like I'm having a lot of hip flexor tightness. Like I always screen them for a bone stress injury, because if they go to their doctor and a doctor tells their long distance runner that you have a hip flexor strain, the chance of that is so low. It's usually bony related or possibly referring from somewhere else. But the chance of a long distance runner pulling their hip flexor is very low.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm like positive, truly. I messed up my hip flexor. Well, I thought I messed up my hip flexor. And when I was going to PT and stuff, we were doing a lot for like a year, 2 years ago now. And in the last couple of years, I've learned more. And I truly think that it was bone related at this point because of the symptoms and whatnot. And it wasn't until I took a substantial amount of time off that it actually fully went away. And I never like got it screened or anything, so I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty positive it was.
Yeah. And it's hard to know, like, and sometimes I feel like, oh, am I too in my head about this? Or even when I'm working with a patient, like, am I too in my head, like, because I've had bone stress injuries, am I constantly just like looking for them? But it is always better to just be on the safe side and rule it out. So if someone goes to a PT, there's certain screening tests we can do. But the gold standard is an MRI. So it has a high sensitivity to rule out a bone stress injury. So if you don't see one, you can be pretty confident there's not one on an image. If they need to get like different angles, sometimes like a CT scan can be helpful for like the low back, but an MRI is gold standard. And if you see like that signal on there, that kind of tells you like, okay, we need to back off for a bit. And, if it's high risk, we are going to offload usually with crutches for a period of time. If it's low risk and it's a very low grade, so there's also grades of a bone stress injury in addition to like low and high risk. If it's a low grade, low risk site, sometimes you can, still be walking. You just can't be running at the moment.
Is there like a progression of, is it like bruise and then crack? Is there more along that progression line, or is it just like bruise and then crack?
Yep, exactly. There's so there's grades. So like a grade 1, for example, is like there's swelling on the bone essentially. Grade 2 is like the swelling is kind of like going into the bone a little bit further. Grade 3 is like more swelling, and then 4 is like when you actually start to see that line form. And so and I would have to like look at the chart just to be like for sure on like how far it's extending into the bone on those other grades. But usually by the time there's a visible line, that's like, okay, we need to like take some time off of this so that it can heal. And if it's in those higher spots, we just have to be really careful, depending on where in the bone it is too. So this is like the other interesting thing, like the front of the shin, like that tension side of the bone that exists in other bones too. So like the stress reaction I had in my hip was on the compression side. So that's like the safer side of the bone. Whereas like if it was on the outside of that hip femoral neck, that's always getting tensioned when you walk. So that's, again, like a high risk site for a bone stress injury because you might have to get surgery. Otherwise, it just won't heal on its own. Yeah. But it is interesting, like the grades. And I feel like if we can catch it early, like obviously that's the best plan of action. And sometimes you can do everything right. Like sometimes people are fueling properly and they're, doing their training plan, they're doing strengthening, and stuff still happens. So I never like want athletes to be like, why did this happen to me? And like, what did I do wrong? It's like, we're going to look at your history, but sometimes things happen. Like we can't control everything. And I've had injuries where, yeah, even like recently where I was like, oh, I thought I was like doing everything right. And then it was like a cascade of just, I think, other life things that added stress. Like there's so many other factors that can contribute to BSIs too. So if you're seeing in someone's training, like, okay, like, on paper, this looks great, but then they're traveling and they had a job change and their family member's sick. Like there's like so many other things that can just like really bog you down and affects your immune system and how well you're recovering. And like all of that can also play into why someone might get hurt, because all of this happens on a very like microscopic level with our hormones. So if that hormone pathway is getting affected in any way, under fueling, increased stress, then that's going to impact estrogen. That's going to impact all the growth hormones that are needed for bone building and bone turnover. So that's the cascade effect of why they usually happen.
Yeah, because I was going to ask too, with age and then with hormones being, perimenopausal, we work with a lot of postmenopausal women.
Yeah.
And how that affects bone injuries, because is it after 30 when we start losing bone density?
Yeah, or like even like estrogen levels can sometimes be affected at that point. So
Right.
yeah, and it's interesting because I view, and it's all because of different reasons. But like a young female athlete who's under eating, a pregnant woman or a postpartum woman who's lactating, and then like a woman going through menopause, like estrogen is like involved in why like things are happening and why things are changing and why bone mineral density might be lower. So, and estrogen is responsible for so many other things. So if you're having even like the mood swings or like mood disturbances or difficulty concentrating or these digestive issues, and maybe you're getting like joint irritation in other parts of your body that aren't just maybe affecting like your shin or something. There's like estrogen is involved in all of those. And so anytime someone is kind of nearing that time in their life where things are changing hormonally, I'm usually having that conversation of, are we looking into doing a blood lab test and just like figuring out where your levels are? And there are a lot of integrative health providers who can do that and order those labs, which is super helpful because I feel like they look at the whole picture. Sometimes when you go to, like a hospital physician, they're, it depends. Like, are you symptomatic? Like, if you're not symptomatic, they might not be on the preventative side of care and really looking out for you. Thinking like even just months down the road, like it might not be something where we've got to wait 10 years until there's a problem. So I'm usually pushing people towards integrative health now, just so they can have a more comprehensive view of where their, iron is, like where their ferritin is, where your like T3 free is, and all these different like thyroid function and estrogen, luteinizing hormone, FSH. Like we want to know everything, because if we wait until there's a problem, then it's like trying to backtrack and get better. So yeah, I am encouraging blood tests in pretty much any age that's experiencing symptoms, and registered dietitians can also order them. But the integrative health providers are going to be able to prescribe something if you need something beyond that. So I think that's where it's like, where can we move the needle in someone's health and performance? And I think if you're experiencing that, we just have to talk about it more, because I think so many women are like, oh, I'm like, it's embarrassing, or I don't want to, I don't want to admit that like these things are happening to me. But yeah, it's our body, and like those are the changes that happen. And same thing with young girls, like we have to talk about periods, or if we don't, then they're just going to be like, oh, it's great that I don't have it because now I don't hurt when I'm running on my 1 week a month. And it's like, no, like we need to be getting your cycle, or this is going to turn into bigger problems down the road. and for male athletes, it's different, but it's the same. Like, we have to be fueling enough. I think the biggest signs and symptoms in male athletes that some healthcare providers shy away from is the low libido and morning erections, but it's the same thing. It's like if you're losing that, and like facial hair is changing, there's just other things that are signs and symptoms that if we can catch them early, it's better for that athlete in the long run.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's like, are we fueling enough?
Mm.
And in a world where, social media is, it's a lot. And I think the comparison trap is the biggest thing that, gets people of like, oh, well, like this person said to do this and like this person said to do this. So I'm always like, okay, just like fact check where you're getting your information. Some people can train a certain way and they're going to be fine. And some people can train a different way and they're going to do well off of that. So I think like everyone's just very individual in how they have to be cared for, which is like the fun part of it. If everyone was like the same, then it's like, what would be the point? But everyone is so unique in what they do in their life. But also that includes like their sport, but also like outside of their sport.
Mhm. I really appreciate your comments with all the nutrition because I do think we're talking about it more now,
Yeah.
but just from, coming from more of like the Western side and hospitals and stuff, like we just never really like talked about nutrition and how important it
Yeah.
is for bone health, for overall capacity. And I think there's just a lot to that.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like, people focus so much on like what's healthy, but it's like, well, healthy is just, are you it's all those other things, right? It's like, are you concentrating? Are you happy? Like, where is your mood? Are you running well? Do you feel like you're recovering well? Like, that's what healthy is. And food should just be like your fuel. So, you might feel a little gross if you ate like McDonald's for every meal of the day, but it's not a bad thing to have McDonald's. So it's like at the end of the day, it's are we getting enough for your tank? So if you think of it like your car can't run on E. And your body is going to compensate before you crash and burn. And that's where all those other symptoms come from. So you might notice these like little changes of like, oh, I'm training harder, but I'm not actually that hungry now. Or like you start losing your hunger cues, like your body's starting to slowly shut down essentially. And that's why people's periods stop. It's like your body was like, well, to keep living, like we technically don't need the reproductive system. We need your brain and we need your heart and we need your lungs. And so like everything else just starts shutting down. And at that point, it's going to take some time to recover. So another question that a lot of people ask is like, well, if I'm going through reds, like, can I still be running? Can I still be competing? Can I still be training? And I think if someone's not getting their cycle or not getting their period, they can, it's going to be a matter of like, what can we change in your training first to get that back? Like maybe you don't need to stop everything, but we got to modify. Um, and we have to be fueling properly. Like that's the number one thing. But we're probably going to have to change like how competitive we are, how intense we're training for a while. And if you can get that back and keep that for a series of months, then we know we're starting to be regular again. But it can take a while to like fully be regular. And the other thing I'll tell people is like, if you're getting your cycle, like, are you ovulating? So some people are getting a period, but they're not actually ovulating, which means we're not getting that spike in luteinizing hormone that we need. So there are like at home ovulation strips people can take and check in on that. But yeah, I think it's hard to know. And when I was in college, I lost my cycle for a while, and that's what happened when my injuries started. And I had like all male medical staff, and I was told to go on birth control to fix that instead of like addressing the problem. And birth control isn't getting your period. It's a false bleed. So for so long I just like thought, oh, okay, great, I'll take this thing and like I'll be able to run and compete and do all this. But I was just breaking down further. To the point where it was like every season I was getting something. And when I got sick, I got really sick. And I'd wake up at night and be like anxious and cold and hungry. And it was just like the nutritionist wasn't on site. We had a dietitian that would come like once every 2 weeks, and cross country season is football season. So like football got the got the resources pretty much. So yeah, it was like a hard time. But then that like sparked my interest again of like, what is going on? Like why aren't we talking about, at the time, this was like 2014. So like female athlete triad was kind of the new thing like in research. And then I ended up doing my thesis in college on that, was like female athlete triad awareness, because I was like, I didn't know about this. Like my coach didn't talk about this. My physician like pretty much forced me to eat, but I didn't know why. Like there was just like no education around what was actually going on. And now we
What's
know
the
a lot more.
difference
Like,
between that and
yeah.
REDS? Sorry to
So
cut you
yeah,
off.
female athlete triad was basically this, triangle of low fueling leading to a loss of cycle, loss of bone mineral density, and that's basically expanded from there. So now we know there's more than just our period and bones, and it's affecting all these different systems in our body and all genders. So female athlete triad was kind of like the first thing, and then now we know all genders are affected and all parts of our body are essentially affected, and that's where REDS came from. And yeah, there's like so many great researchers out there doing stuff. Lots of good like ways to kind of test and screen for REDS now, and physicians are the ones who will like officially diagnose it. But if you're like hearing those signs and symptoms, you can kind of assume someone's somewhere on that spectrum of probably just not getting enough fuel. But that's where getting to the dietitian, like to a physician who specializes in REDS, and then someone on the rehab side for physical therapy to kind of help get you back into it after, is really helpful, because that return to run looks a lot different than someone returning to run who's maybe been fueling good all along and just kind of had a blip in the system. It just takes a lot more time for your body to actually fully recover. So even after your bone heals, like your bone turnover and recovery is still happening, even like a year or so out. So what's kind of interesting is if you were to like take an MRI of someone's leg, if they're healing from a bone stress injury at different points in time over that year, you might still see swelling on the bone even several months later, even though the symptoms are gone, which is good. Like we essentially want to be not symptomatic. And that's just so like athletes don't freak out, but it's basically like your bone is still healing. So we don't want to be symptomatic with bones. We can have symptoms with things like tendons and muscles and still be okay. But it's really like listening to those symptoms and what you're feeling.
I'm
Yeah.
so happy that we finally have research and that we're talking about these things, because I feel like specifically us like 90s babies, because I was in the same boat, lost my period. I was long distance track in high school and I did cross in college. Same thing, lost it. They put me on birth control. I went back after 6 months because I got started getting my period again.
Yeah.
And they were like, cool, you're good, so you can go off of it again. Then immediately lost the period again, and then they put it on.
Yeah.
I went on for like another 6 months, and same thing. They were like, nope, you're good, like you're fine. And
Yeah.
the whole time I knew like this is not what I want and not good.
Yeah.
But and then the other thing I remember from college too is we had somebody come in and something like they were telling us that for every 1 to 2 pounds you lose, you can take off X amount of seconds from your mile pace. And that was, the education that I was getting as, this college student who's already worried about my weight. And I wasn't a super fast runner. It's not like I was trying to get in the top, but I was still concerned about how I was running because I was very self-conscious about many things at that point. And it's nice that we're starting to get people that are talking to high schoolers and having people like you that are coaches on high school teams and having it be more widely talked about with menstrual cycles. And that, yes, if you are on hormonal birth control, that does not mean that you're getting a regular cycle or that you're not ovulating because you're
Mm-hmm.
using artificial hormones for that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's and I mean, there's plenty of MDs and stuff that I still go to that don't talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Because yeah, it's like not screened enough, and I don't. It'd be cool if somehow, like even in those pre-physicals that happen, before an athlete has to compete in or gets to compete in high school, college, whatever level, it's like, why aren't we like doing some sort of tracking? And some athletes are lucky enough that are at a research university to get those sort of resources, but they're being studied, so it's like, oh, we're going to have all the nice equipment and tools, but some of it doesn't take a whole lot. Like there's questionnaires that you could be asking and just little ways to figure some of it out at least. And I do think all coaches should be educated on it. If you're, coaching youth athletes, like you need to know the signs to look for, because we want people to enjoy their sport into their later years. And if they're constantly getting hurt, the chance of just never returning to their favorite sport is so high. So like you see these dropouts, like whether it's, mental health related or because of the injury, like spiraled into mental health and just like constantly feeling like they weren't good enough or couldn't get back to it's so high. So if we can, be better on the front end. And that's, I think, part of the hard thing about um, big kind of corporate healthcare is like we're constantly on the like quick fix it side of things, like wait till you're hurt to actually be seen instead of the preventative. And it's really hard to advocate for yourself in a system like that when insurance companies don't reimburse for preventative care. So that's, I think, the hardest part about that kind of system is like some of these things could be prevented if we're educating, but if we're starting to see signs, like we need to, like that should be enough to get help.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I think like, yeah, it is hard for a lot of women to talk about it because it's been going on for decades. So it's like if we don't normalize it, it's always going to be just like this kind of like underlying thing of issues happening over and over. And I know like Mary Kane just came out with her book. This isn't about running, and I still need to read it. I have it. That's like my next book that I got to read. But I mean, that's like the extremes. And there's probably even more beyond that. Like, I mean, losing your period and not feeling enough is a really serious problem. Like people, young women and all genders, like people die from that. So I think people are like, oh, it's okay. But it's like, no, like this is like just a cascade of you're maybe in a functioning state of this, but it's so serious.
And knowing like
And
what's common versus normal, because it's so
right.
common now to not have your period or to be on birth control, or
Yeah.
I see so many people with debilitating cycles and that
Right.
take them out of their activity or falling over with pain or
Yeah.
severe cramping and mood swings, and knowing that
Yeah.
that's so common, but we should
Right.
not be having that severe of
Right.
symptoms.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like, just, there is a time and place for birth control. And I think just checking why you're using it or why someone told you to be on it, and kind of asking those questions, because if there's something going on that doesn't feel normal, then voice that and like bring that to your healthcare provider's attention, because everyone's so different. But I think there's a lot of people that are told like, oh, that's just like, that is common. Yeah, it is common, but it's not normal. So people are kind of they just assume they have to deal with it. And it's like, no, like you can get help for that. There are so many different types out there. And then, to your point about debilitating cycles, like that could also be a warning sign that something's going on. So you don't have to assume that that's normal just because it's bothering you that much, and other people have that bothering them too. And I think getting things tested, like it's good to know.
Other than testing and fueling, what else, like in your practice, do you talk about with your patients that can help with preventing bone injuries or coming back from a
Yeah.
stress injury?
Good question. So, once they're kind of in a good fueling state, resistance training is huge. And I think more runners should be strength training. the minimum effective dose is like 2 to 3 times a week. And if you can hit those major muscle groups, like your quads, your glutes, your hammies, your calves. My hot take is that calves are very represented in the strength training world for most individuals, but especially runners, because most of your propulsion's coming from there. So I think a lot of people are like, oh, my glutes don't fire, but it's like your glutes are gonna fire. Like, you're moving forward. Like, they have to fire for you to move forward. But like your calves, that's where your propulsion's coming from. Some people have glute strength and they just like, it's a neuromotor thing where they're like, oh, I just kind of like, I sit into my hips and I do certain things. And like, unless you're having symptoms, it's not necessarily something you have to be like, oh, you need to do XYZ, but like, we should be strengthening those muscles because they're your stability. They're the muscles that are going to power you forward. And specifically for bones, when our muscles contract, again, that's like pulling at the bone. Like, that's how your bones get stronger, is by having that muscle strength. So if we don't have the muscle strength, like, your bones aren't going to be strong either. And for bone loading specifically, bones respond really well to heavy and fast contractions. So like, if you were to lower, like back squat, for example, like lowering into a squat, but then coming out of it quicker, like that creates that stimulus on the bone that we need to see change, or kind of that, osteoclastic and then osteoblastic activity that's constantly happening, the breakdown and building. We need a strong enough stimulus for that to happen. So heavy, faster contractions, and then actually doing plyometrics. So training a runner like you would a soccer player or a basketball player, like multi-directional movement, because we're running in one plane over and over, that compressive force. And bones get bored after about 60 strides or steps. So I think a lot of people think, oh, running's so good for my bones, but running is actually not good, or it's not helpful for your bones. Like, it's not necessarily going to hurt you, but that's not going to build your bone strength. Resistance training and eating right is going to build your bone strength. So
say it louder for the people in back, please.
Yeah. Fuel, eat, and you can do your strength.
And that's coming from
running,
3 people who make a living working with runners.
Yeah.
Running is not going to help you with those things.
We get that all the time.
I'll die on that horse.
Yeah,
maybe running 10 minutes. Maybe running 10
right.
minutes, you could argue, is good for your bones. But
yeah, if you want to swap to sprinting, and great. Let's just
but you're
sprint.
not doing that, right? Likely.
Yeah, so it is kind of funny, because I'm like, we got to train you like a soccer player, like a basketball player, and get those different like torques and forces on your bone. Otherwise, you don't get the stimulus you need.
I think it's funny, because I think one of the best ways for me, this made it very eye-opening, is if you remove running from your life and you look at your diet, how much you're eating, and then how often you are exercising, but running can't be a part of that.
Right.
But it's amazing how low both of those things tend to be for people. And if you're sitting there like listening right now and you're like, okay, if I do that and I look at my food and I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I'm sorry, but then if you add the running back in, that is not enough, right? So it's a very good, I think it's a great general rule of thumb to kind of look at and think about. And then if you want to, kind of get into more guideline specific and talk about how often you should be strength training and stuff, I've had that conversation so many times, because
right in your wheelhouse. Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, like we should be. The recommendation is, depending on where you look, at least 2, and a lot of times it says 3 sessions per week, right? And that could be 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour.
Right.
And that's if you're not running. Like that's just the recommendation. So how are we not then, if we're doing a sport that is beating our bodies up as much as it is, how are we not like,
Yeah.
It's honestly impressive we don't have more bone injuries. Not
that
I'm trying to manifest
mentally
this, but
mentally we are so strong mentally and strong-willed. I think they just run through the shit. And then eventually they end up at 50 under the person who's like, I have to replace both my knees, or I don't run anymore because my ankle is chronically messed up. And it's like, unfortunately, the last 20 years, what were you doing?
Yeah. Well, and it's like, catching, because at some point, like, something will stop you, and it's like, can we get on the front side of that and, like, do all these other things to match the load that we're trying to do? Because I think the other thing that happens sometimes with people is they're just underloaded. They're like, oh yeah, I am doing squats and I am doing this, and it's like, okay, but like squats with a 10-pound weight is like a good, maybe if you're like just getting into strengthening and have to like introduce it somehow, like that might have been fine months ago, but like we need to progress from there. Like if we're not lifting heavy enough, again, like your body's just not getting the stimulus it needs to undergo several times your body weight when you do take a step outside to run for 7 miles. So if you're going for a run, it's like that over and over. Your body has to be strong enough or resilient enough to take on that load. And I think, the best thing you can do for yourself, just as like a healthy, to have a healthy life, is to resistance train, even if you weren't running. Because, like later in life, if you fall, like we don't want to break a hip. Like we want to be able to get off the floor when we're, 70 plus and have other, like you want to garden, like you want to play with grandkids. Like there's so many other things that we should be able to do in older age. And we're lucky that running is kind of a longevity sport. Like you see 90-year-olds out there doing marathons, which is great. And it's just like, there's not a one size fits all. Like everyone's going to have their own needs. Some people, like maybe who have had some underfueling, are going to need a little bit different needs than someone who's fueled really well throughout their whole life, or maybe their genetic makeup's just a little different. Like there's so many things that can influence what your body needs, but it's interesting. There's like so many ways that can go, and I think if people want to be healthy in the long run, you got to do the right things now.
And I even see it with trail running too, because you're, hopping over rocks, you're going side to side.
Yeah.
And if you trip over something, I feel like you're much less susceptible to falling on your face, like completely falling, or spraining your ankle in a way where you can't run anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're able to then catch yourself so you don't fall. And then, I was just out on the trails this weekend, and I felt my whole foot just like completely collapse.
Well,
and I was able to keep running, because at first it was like, oh no, what just happened?
Yeah.
And then I was able to keep going because I feel like it helps your body to become that much more adaptable. Not saying we can always prevent that, but I feel like the likelihood of preventing it definitely goes up with plyo, strength, resistance training.
Yeah, and just like that reactive strength with like being able to, like your body can kind of like self-correct in the moment, which is really cool. And I think because you said you ran cross country too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think like years of being in spikes on like uneven golf courses is also just like some like low level ingrained. Yeah, I remember being on some courses where I'm like, oh my gosh, like there was like a literal hole, and then like somehow I was like just kept going. So I think there is some of that. Like there's a little bit of muscle memory. If your joints and ligaments are good and you're fueling right, and they can react in those ways, and you're training properly to react in those ways, then your chance of getting hurt is a lot less. Yeah. Or having recurrent injuries. So I think like sometimes runners, they'll just think they have to deal with something because they're like, oh, this like little thing that's going on, and it's like, no, that like you shouldn't have that little thing. Like go get seen for the little thing, and then it won't change how you're running or you're compensating or doing other things. And again, like there's so many things you can run with. Like you don't have to, complete rest is not the answer either. There's a lot of things that do not require complete rest, like the severe high risk bone injuries. Those are the things that require a period of rest, and you're still probably working other parts of your body during that time. But there's like so many things you can still run with. It's just like finding those thresholds of what you can tolerate and what we need to do to actually change that tissue. Yeah.
That was a very fast. That's another
I know.
very fast podcast.
That was great. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen again.
Are there any other things that we missed that you're like, man, I wish every runner, athlete, anyone knew about bones and everything we talked about?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think my biggest, I guess, recommendation would be, don't be afraid to speak up. Like if something's wrong and you feel that something's wrong, and go to your coach, like have that conversation. And if they're not listening and they're continuing to push, even though you've voiced those concerns, then go to someone else. Like you don't have to take that sort of advice. Your health matters more than anything. So I think, if you're worried about, um, points for a team, or, a time that you didn't hit, like the bigger picture is seeing the long run, essentially, is like, where do I want to be in 5-10 years from now? Like, do I want that cycle of injuries, or do I want to be able to be strong, So, and that's really hard for young people. And I think anyone like in a really competitive state to see, because they're like, well, no, I'm like here and now, like I have to do this thing. But I think like speak up would be my biggest thing. If you see something going on with a teammate too, like have that conversation with them if you see them struggling. And I think it's a touchy subject, but it's, if you're not forward about it and you have a good relationship with that person, I think you're going to feel worse later if you didn't say anything. So going to someone, getting help, and then eat enough, like just eat. Like we have to eat enough. And if you're concerned or have any sort of qualms about, am I doing that? Like I think I'm eating enough, but I don't really know. There's so many good registered dietitians and providers in the area who can give you that individualized care on like, here's what you're doing. Like we'll look at growth charts, like we'll look at your whole history and like figure out what you actually need. And I'm happy to send over some names for that too, just like locally, but also I'm in a group called Lane 9, which is a lot of providers who specialize in women's health, essentially, and more so even focused on REDS. So like our individuals and athletes getting that sort of care and attention to detail in their care. So it's not just like they advertise it as, like women supporting women in sport, but all of those providers see all genders. Like they are working with any individual to make sure they feel supported in their sport, physically, mentally, emotionally, fueling wise. There's mental health therapists in there. There's sports psychologists. There's, I think, social workers. There's physical therapists, coaches. Everyone is in there. So acupuncture, like everyone is in there. So it's great. It's a really cool community that, and they're constantly throwing, questions in there like, hey, is there a provider in this small town in Massachusetts? Like everything is in there to try and help bring these resources to people earlier on who are looking for it. So yeah, get care, speak up, and eat. Those are my big, and strength train. Like get your doses in, find your person that is going to help you get on track, because that's what's going to help you in the long run.
I loved all of this, and I'm biased, but I really hope that everyone listens to this one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good information there. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Yeah, and if people have questions for me too, like I'm totally fine if people email me.
How can people find you and follow you, Bethany?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram. I'm not great at posting all the time. That's maybe something I need to work on. But my
I've seen you a lot lately.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying on
like you're pretty good at it.
I've been impressed.
Okay, I'm trying.
It's like you're pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's at Tempo PT and Running. And then my email is bethany@tempoptandrunning.com. So it's very similar. And then my website is Tempo PT and Running. So it's I'm online. If people have questions or actually need physical therapy, I do like 90-minute evals. Like I get a full history on people that are coming in. We're looking at everything, including treatment in those first sessions. And if someone's running and having symptoms with running, there's sometimes gait analysis associated with that. But like if people need help or they just have questions, like I'm happy to be a resource or someone that you can just ask questions and get you to the right people too.
Great. I have one last burning question for you.
Yeah.
Listeners want to know, and us, what your We Get to Do This moment is. A moment of any time in your life, personally, professionally, any time where you were like, wow, I get to do this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I think, yeah, it's hard. I think, honestly, with running, it is now, I think, since having injuries, it's like anytime I get to be outside and on a trail and running with friends, like that is a very special moment for me because it's like, oh, I get to do this now. Like when I'm hurt, I don't get to do this. So when I'm actually like healthy, like things are clicking, I'm fueling properly, I'm doing my resistance, and I'm out there, especially like those first few runs after dealing with something for a while is so special. So I think those are highlights. And even more so, like this is something like my parents would do like when I was younger. Like I'd run and they'd bike by me. Like that's a very special moment for me, is like when my parents are still able to bike by me. So if I can do that, then that's like my we get to do this. And then now it's kind of giving it back. So like I get to bike by the girls that I get to coach, like in cross country. And I think that's really special. So sharing those moments is really fun for me.
I love it. What a great episode. Thanks
Yeah.
for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for
Definitely have
having
you
me.
on
This was
again.
so fun.
We'll
Yeah, I
have to
feel
have
like
you
we
on
could
and dive
talk
into
forever.
the pelvis at some point, because it's
Yeah,
another thing I'd love to talk to you
Yeah.
about.
definitely. Yeah, that's yep, and that there's some carryover from this conversation, so that would be great.
Thanks for being on here, Bethany. And if it's your first time listening, thank you so much for being here. And looking forward to having some more awesome guests on in the future as well. So thank you so much, Bethany. Really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you.
That's a wrap. If you are new here, welcome. We're so glad you get to do this with us. Before you go, what's your We Get to Do This moment for the week? We'd love to hear it. Comment on this episode or email us at wegettodothis@gmail.com.
And if this episode hit for you, share it with a friend and leave us a review on whatever platform you listened on. It genuinely helps. We get to do this.